He was the only man in the city who knew there was a spy station hidden in the subway. The problem was, he found out by accident, in the middle of the night, alone. He wasn't a spy. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't carry a gun. He didn't drink martinis on assignment. He wore orange overalls and steel-toe boots. He carried a flashlight, a wrench, and a radio that never stopped hissing. He was a night maintenance worker in the metro, 44 years old, one ex-wife, one teenage daughter who rolled her eyes whenever he tried to explain how the city really works. If you ever rode that big European capital's subway in the last years of the Cold War, you never saw him. But he saw everything under your feet. By day, the subway was a river of faces. Business suits, shopping bags. Tourists with maps held the wrong way. By night, it was a different planet. Empty platforms, dark tunnels, cold air that smelled like dust, metal, and old rain. The trains went back to depots. The announcements stopped. The city above lowered its voice. Down here, a thin skeleton crew kept the vanes open. Check the signals. Test the power. Walk the tracks. Listen for the wrong kind of silence. Most people thought the metro ended where the platform lights stopped. He knew better. Behind the walls, there were service corridors, cross passages, signal rooms, feeder shafts, hidden stairways, doors with no numbers on them. On his first week, an older worker had told him, "Forget the passenger map. That's for tourists. The real map is in your head." After 20 years on the job, he was the map. He could tell you, by the echo alone, exactly which stretch of tunnel you were standing in. He knew where the air felt damp from a leak, where the tracks always vibrated a little too much, which wooden sleepers hadn't been replaced yet, no matter what the paperwork said. And he knew every gray metal cabinet bolted to the walls between stations, or at least he thought he did. The cabinets were the subway's nerve endings, signal relays, track circuits, communication lines. On the blueprints, each had a small code and a fistful of cables running in and out. They were ugly, honest boxes, old paint, dents, graffiti from bored workers. Boring, until one night one of them wasn't. It was a Tuesday, just before midnight. Winter. The kind of cold that makes metal ring when you hit it and throws your breath back in your face in little white ghosts. He'd been sent to check a stubborn signal fault between two of the oldest stations on the line. The day crew had written intermittent flicker in the log. Not a dramatic phrase. But down here, intermittent was the word you respected the most. Sometimes it meant, this bulb will die next week. Sometimes it meant, one day a train won't stop where it's supposed to. He took the service passage instead of walking open along the tracks. Low ceiling, concrete walls sweating in places, cables strapped overhead like black veins. His boots rang softly on the metal grating. He walked with the slightly hunched gait of a man whose body knew these tunnels better than any street above. And then his flashlight slid across something that made him stop. A gray metal cabinet. That part was normal. Its existence was not. It stood half a meter further out from the wall than the others. The paint was the wrong shade of gray, too fresh, too smooth. The lock wasn't one of theirs. He frowned and stepped closer. The workers had a saying, "You know it belongs to us if it looks older than your father." Their cabinets were relics. This one looked younger than his boots. He ran his hand over the front panel. No stencil code, no rust, no oil smears, not a single scratched initial. Clean. Too clean. He tilted his light up. Cables ran into it. Thick ones, live ones, not branching from their sidelines, branching straight off the main feed. They disappeared into the mystery box and reappeared on the other side as if nothing had happened. He pulled the folded blueprint from his shoulder bag. Blue lines. Neat symbols. Cabinet S17 on the left. Cabinet S18 on the right. Nothing in between. He traced the space with his finger. On paper, This patch of wall was empty concrete. No new install. No handwritten note. He had walked this tunnel 100 times. But the mind is lazy. It fills in what it expects to see. Tonight, that reflex finally snapped. "How long have you been hiding here?" he muttered. The cabinet just hummed faintly, vibrating with whatever lived inside. He could have walked on. He should have walked on. His work order said, "Check signal at marker 12," not "rewrite the Cold War." But the subway was his machine, and someone had bolted a secret part into its body without asking. It offended him, not like a patriot, like a mechanic. His radio hissed on his shoulder. "Section C. Status?" his supervisor crackled. "Between Central and Riverside," he said. "Checking cabinets." "Copy. Don't take all night. Power test at 2. The radio clicked off. He looked back at the unlabeled box. Too late, he thought. It already took my night. He checked the lock. Not their standard cylinder. Different brand. Better metal. Whoever did this hadn't cut corners. He tried 2 of the universal keys all workers carried. Neither turned. Of course. He slid the keyring away and reached into a small side pocket for something that definitely wasn't listed in the official tools. A slim pick, left over from a younger life doing side jobs for a lock company before his back started complaining. He slid the pick into the keyway and listened. Down here, every sound carried. Each tiny click of a tumbler landing in place sounded unnaturally loud under the concrete. He worked like a technician, not a thief. Gentle pressure, tiny movements, feeling for resistance. After a minute, the lock turned. The door opened with a soft, magnetic sigh. Inside, nothing looked like their equipment. Their gear was big and clumsy, relays the size of bricks, ceramic insulators, cables as thick as his thumb, bundled with whatever tape hadn't run out. This cabinet was deliberate, compact. Metal modules were bolted to a custom frame. Cables were cut to exact lengths, tied perfectly, labeled in tiny, neat handwriting. A small fan whispered at the top, feeding cool air across the boards. At the bottom, a battery pack hummed, a single LED glowing a calm, healthy green. In the center sat a box the size of a hardback book. It had a small numeric display, 3 toggles, and a thick cable running out the back, through a drilled hole in the cabinet roof, up into the concrete. An antenna line, underground. His stomach did a slow, heavy turn. Someone had wired a radio into the bones of his subway. On the side of the box, someone had scratched 3 letters into the metal, not a company logo, not any marking he recognized. A habit, a signature. He touched one of the thinner cables branching off the main bundle. It was warm, not dead, not forgotten. Working. His radio hissed again. This time, something slid in under the static that did not belong to their system. A flat, mechanical female voice, faint but clear, reading numbers in a slow, steady rhythm. 7, 1, 2, 4, 8, 3. Then a burst of white noise. Then silence. He lifted the radio closer. "Control?" he said. "You hearing that?" "Hearing what?" his supervisor replied. "You're clear from here. You sure you're not just listening to your own head?" He looked at the open cabinet, at the antenna cable, at the little box with its dark display. Yeah, he lied. Must be echo. He let go of the talk button and just listened. With the trains asleep, the tunnels had their own sound. Distant fans, water dripping somewhere far down, the low, slow beat of a transformer, and then, again, right at the edge of hearing, that same voice slid in. 0, 5, 9, 2. Repeat. 0, 5. He'd heard about these broadcasts. Shortwave legends. Voices reading endless strings of numbers to nobody. Except everyone knew they weren't to nobody. They were to people with cheap radios and expensive secrets. A numbers station. He looked at the illegal box wired into his line. at the cables feeding it, at the antenna hiding in the concrete above his head. Someone had built a numbers station into the subway, using the city's own communication system as its spine. For a long moment, he just stood there, one hand on the cabinet door, feeling his world shift a few degrees. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't intelligence. He fixed lights. He reset tripped relays. He made sure people got to work on time and home alive. But he also knew where he lived. A neutral capital full of embassies and cultural missions and men in dark coats who never used the main lobby. This cabinet was not a prank. Some service, maybe from the east, maybe from the west, maybe from both, had drilled its way into his tunnels, plugged into his cables, and used his sections as camouflage, without asking, without caring. Nobody had noticed. Nobody but him. Lucky him. He leaned closer to study the box. The display was dark. 3 toggles sat neatly in the middle position. Below them, a row of tiny LEDs, one green, several dormant red, handwritten labels under them, CH1, CH2, TX, RX, transmit, receive. He recognized enough of their own repeaters to feel his throat go dry. On a small shelf inside the door lay a notebook with a brown cover. No title. He hesitated, then picked it up and opened it. Inside, dates, times, 4-digit groups in neat columns, marks in the margin, ticks, crosses, small arrows. It was a log. Every Tuesday, every Thursday, sometimes Saturdays, always between midnight and dawn. The same windows he knew by heart for power tests and maintenance. The hours when the trains were silent, the platforms empty, and the city pretended it was asleep. He pictured a man, some contractor, some specialist, coming down here with a key that wasn't on any official ring, flipping switches, letting that mechanical voice ride their lines out of the ground, through the concrete, into the night. No van. No obvious antenna on a roof. Just a city full of steel and concrete beams quietly turned into a disguised broadcast tower. And the subway, his subway, as its backbone. He didn't hear the footsteps until they were close. Sound in tunnels lied. A single step could bounce off 3 walls before it reached you. He felt it first. A faint tremor through the floor grating under his boots. Then the metallic ring of a heel on a ladder rung. Someone was coming down the service passage toward him. His radio crackled, louder now. Section C, his supervisor again. We just saw a brief dip on the auxiliary line near your section. Did you disconnect anything? He stared at the open cabinet, at the bundle of cables he'd disturbed when he pulled the notebook from its shelf, at the little illegal heart beating inside the wall. No, he said quickly. Just checking contacts. Might have brushed something. Everything's stable. Don't improvise down there, the supervisor snapped. Control hates surprises. Yeah, he thought. So do spies. The footsteps drew closer. He could see a faint halo of light at the bend in the passage. Another worker? His supervisor? Or someone who knew, very precisely, which cabinet wasn't supposed to exist here? His fingers tightened around the notebook. His other hand still rested on the open door. He had seconds. He could shut the cabinet, wipe his prints on his overalls, and pretend he'd never seen inside. Let the numbers keep flowing through his tunnels, feeding ghosts he would never meet. Or he could leave it open, call it in, and pull on a wire that ran into places where people didn't like their wires touched. His radio hissed one more time. In between the supervisor's irritation and the static, that mechanical voice slid through again, clearer now, as if it was standing right behind him. 3, 6, 9, 1. Repeat. 3, 6. The city above slept. The platforms were dark, and in a strip of concrete between 2 anonymous stations, in front of a cabinet that did not exist on any official map, a tired subway worker finally understood. that the Cold War had crawled into his tunnels too. And whoever was about to come around that corner might not be happy to find the door already open. The light at the bend grew brighter, bootsteps on metal. Closer. He shut the notebook on instinct but didn't have time to hide it. A figure turned the corner. Yellow hard hat, reflective vest, flashlight beam slicing the dark. "Hey," the man called. "You still down here? Signal desk says—" He stopped when his light hit the open cabinet. Not the old one. The new one. The one that didn't exist. For a second, both men just stared at each other over the open door. "Since when do we have 2 boxes on this stretch?" the other worker asked slowly. The maintenance man's mouth went dry. "You tell me," he said. "You've seen this one before?" The other man hesitated a fraction too long. Then his radio crackled. Not the normal channel, a different tone, a different voice. "Unit 5, status?" the voice asked. "Is he there?" The other worker flinched, as if he'd been caught doing something with the wrong phone. He lifted the radio to his mouth, eyes never leaving the open cabinet. "Yeah," he said. "He's here." And he opened it. The maintenance worker felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. The voice on the radio didn't sound surprised. "Stay with him," it said. "Do not let him touch anything else. We're on our way." The radio clicked off. The other worker tried on a smile that didn't fit his face. "Best close that up, yeah?" he said. "Looks unsafe." The maintenance man looked at the illegal hardware, the notebook in his hand, the antenna cable disappearing into concrete. Then he looked at the colleague whose radio talked to the wrong people. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Unsafe is one word for it." He closed the cabinet door, but he didn't lock it. He had the feeling that, very soon, it wouldn't be his decision who opened it next. They didn't cuff him. They didn't drag him. They just escorted him out of the tunnel like a piece of slightly dangerous cargo. First, up a service ladder into a locked equipment room. Then, through an unmarked door he had never bothered to notice in 20 years. On the other side was a short corridor and another door with a serious lock. The kind of door that didn't care about subway tickets or staff IDs. Beyond that, a small room with a table, 4 chairs, a wall clock, and no windows. He had been in rooms like this once or twice in his life, never as the main attraction. "Sit," the other worker said. His voice had changed. Flatter. Less mate from the night shift, more, "This is my real job." The maintenance man sat. The room hummed with the same frequency as the tunnels. He could feel the subway through the floor. He wished it could feel him back. They made him wait. Not long enough for outrage, just long enough for his imagination to start pacing. The wall clock ticked. His radio lay on the table, turned off. The notebook was gone, spirited away by hands that said nothing. He flexed his fingers and realized they were trembling. The door opened. 2 men came in. Not uniforms. Dark suits. Not the hotel kind, not shiny. Serious fabric. "Mister," one of them said, glancing at a thin file. He read the name out. His name, his address, his date of birth. "You've worked for the Metro for 20 years, the man finished. "Signal and maintenance?" It wasn't a question. "Yes," the worker said. The other man placed a small black recorder on the table and pressed a button. "For the record," he said, "we are from the Federal Security Service, Internal Section." He spoke the name of the service the way you speak the name of a hospital you hope never to need. The maintenance worker swallowed. "I thought you were transit security," he said. "We sometimes borrow their doors," the first man said. "Tell us about the cabinet." He told them. About the wrong paint, the wrong lock, the missing code on the blueprint, about the antenna cable heading into the concrete, about the neat modules and labels, about the notebook, the dates, the timestamps. He described the numbers he'd heard on the radio. Flat voice, female, reading digits, he said. Same pattern, like this? The second man reached into his pocket, took out a small cassette player, pressed play. A woman's voice, distant and cold, filled the room. 7, 1, 2, 4, 8, 3, 0, 5. The maintenance worker felt all the tiny hairs on his arms stand up. That's it, he said. That's exactly it. The man turned the player off. We've been listening to that voice for months, he said. We just couldn't find her. Her? The worker repeated. The first man smiled without warmth. It's not a real woman, he said. It's a machine, a recording, a number station. I figured that much, the worker said. I just didn't figure someone would glue it into my wall. The two men exchanged a glance. How many of those cabinets do you know by heart? The second man asked. All of them on my line, he answered, and most on the others. If you wake me at 3 in the morning, I can walk from Central to East End blind and tell you where every relay hums. Good, the first man said. That makes this much easier. Easier for who? The worker asked. For everyone who rides your trains, the second man said, and for a handful of people upstairs who have been losing sleep over this channel. He tapped the recorder. This signal has been bleeding into our monitoring network for almost a year, he said. We hear it. We triangulate it. It keeps sliding around, piggybacking on different structures, using different reflections. We suspected apartment roofs, parked trucks, embassy basements. We checked them all. And all this time, the first man added, the spine of the thing was running under our feet, through your cables. He leaned forward. Tell me, when you found that cabinet, why didn't you just close it and walk away? The maintenance worker thought about lying, because he was scared, because he knew better. But the truth that came out surprised even him. Because it doesn't belong there, he said. This is my section. I know every bolt in those walls. Someone shoved a tumor into my tunnels and hoped I wouldn't notice. The men in suits were quiet for a second. Then the second one nodded once, almost to himself. We can work with that, he said. They showed him a map, not the colorful one tourists used. A technical diagram of the entire metro, spiderwebbed with red lines and circles. Some circles were solid, others had question marks in them. This, the first man said, tapping the section between Central and Riverside. We now know is one of the feeder points. There may be others. He moved his finger along the lines. Every few nights, during maintenance windows, the numbers come through, he said. Always the same pattern. 3 blocks, repeated twice, then silence. To who? The worker asked. To anyone with the right receiver and the right one-time pad, the second man said. Apartment downtown. Car parked in a side street. Shortwave set in the attic of a townhouse. We're working on that. Which side? The worker asked. East? West? The first man shrugged. In this city, he said. Take your pick. Could be either. Could be both. Could be one group riding on top of another's hardware. That's why we're careful. He pointed at the cabinet's location on the map again. What matters is this, he said. They're using critical infrastructure as camouflage. They assume nobody at your level cares enough to look closely, and nobody at our level knows enough about the tunnels to spot it. He sat back. Tonight, he said, they got unlucky. The maintenance worker rubbed his hands over his face. I'm not an agent, he said. I don't know anything about codes or who's fighting who. You're telling me my job suddenly matters to people with guns. I fix lights. And that, the second man said, is exactly why we want you, not some decorated hero. He leaned in. People who play these games expect heroes, he said. They expect double agents, compromised officers, bribed officials. They have files on them. They have plans for them. They do not expect the man who knows which cabinet should rattle and which one shouldn't. He let that sink in. Tonight, you opened the wrong door without getting caught or blown up, he went on. That makes you more useful than half the idiots who wear ties in our building. The maintenance man almost laughed. Almost. So, what exactly do you want me to do? He asked. First, nothing dramatic, the first man said. You go back to your section. You pretend this was a long, boring lecture about safety. You do not talk about secret cabinets to your colleagues, your family, or the drunk at your corner bar. He took a small card from his pocket and placed it on the table. No name, just a number. If anyone asks you about that cabinet, he said, anyone who isn't us, you call this from a public phone. Say only your name and tunnel and hang up. And then we'll decide if it's time to come pick you up again. The maintenance worker looked at the number. If I don't call, he asked, then we assume you're talking to someone else about the same topic, the second man said softly. And we treat you as part of the problem, not the accident. There was no threat in his tone, which made the threat very clear. What about the cabinet itself? The worker asked. You just yank it out and call it a day? Both men shook their heads at once. If we rip it out now, whoever built it will know we found it, the first one said. They will go dark. They will rebuild somewhere we can't see. We lose the only wire that currently runs from us to them. So you let them keep broadcasting? For a little while, the second man said. On our terms. He opened another folder. Inside was a photocopy of a handwritten log. Dates, times, numbers. The worker recognized the notebook he'd touched. We already have months of their traffic recorded, the man said. But we need names sitting in front of cabinets and names sitting in front of radios. To get those, we have to make the people in the middle nervous. He pointed at the log. Every time a channel like this hiccups, someone has to check it, he said. Tonight, you were the hiccup. They sent a man down to look. He glanced at the door. Our colleagues intercepted him on the way back up. We're listening to what he has to say in a different room. The maintenance worker thought of the fellow night shift guy who had suddenly acquired a different voice. Was he one of yours? He asked. For the Metro, yes, the first man said. For us, no. For someone else. Very much, yes, he sighed. People sell keys, he said. It's not new. Over the next hour, they explained the plan in simple pieces. He would keep working his line. They would watch who came and went around that stretch of tunnel. For a few scheduled broadcasts, they would let the numbers flow as usual, recording everything. Then, at a chosen night, they would flip the script. For one transmission window, the cabinet would be theirs. Same voice, same rhythm, different message. A short burst of carefully crafted disinformation, just enough to make whoever decoded it think a leak had opened somewhere else in the city. The hope was simple. Paranoid people make mistakes. They move too fast. They meet the wrong contact. They send a courier in a hurry. And all along that chain, the service would be waiting. Isn't that dangerous? The worker asked. Feeding lies into whatever this is? The first man shrugged. It's less dangerous than letting them run a secret line under our capital forever, he said. We're not trying to start a war. We're trying to make them look at the wrong place while we look at them. And you're sure they won't come looking for me? The worker asked. The second man studied him. If this works, he said, they'll be too busy looking over their shoulders at each other. He paused. But if anyone asks you weirdly specific questions about cabinets and tunnels, don't try to be clever. Call the number. Let us be clever. They sent him back to work before dawn. The city was still dark when he stepped onto the maintenance platform, but he heard the first early train rumbling awake in the distance. The illegal cabinet was closed. From the outside, it looked like any other gray metal box. He walked past it. He didn't touch it. He did his normal checks, wrote no visible issues in the log, signed his name with the same tired scrawl he'd used for 2 decades. Nobody on the morning rush hour train knew that their route passed a few meters from a spy station wired into the wall. Why would they? The lights were on. The doors opened. The voice told them to mind the gap. Everything was fine, on the surface. The operation took weeks. He saw little pieces, extra inspectors with hard hats that didn't fit right. Service calls assigned to him that came with a second, silent shadow, one of the suits in a fluorescent vest, pretending to count bolts while watching corners. A camera, briefly mounted for structural assessment, pointed just off to the side of the suspicious cabinet. Each time he walked past it, he felt more aware of his own body, as if the concrete could suddenly read his thoughts. He went home after shifts and said nothing to his daughter. She talked about school. He nodded at the right places. At night, when he couldn't sleep, he sometimes turned on a cheap radio he'd bought years ago for football matches and spun the dial slowly across the bands. Once, at 2 a.m, far down the shortwave scale, he caught it. That same flat, distant woman counting numbers into the dark. He listened for a little while, then turned it off. It was one thing to hear her in his tunnels, another to invite her into his bedroom. The night they pulled the trigger felt normal at first. Work order, routine checks. Section, the same old stretch between Central and Riverside. He met a colleague at the staff room, a man he now knew by his real job, not the one on his Metro ID. They rode down together in the empty car. At the bottom of the stairs, the suit gave him a small nod. "This is the one," he said. The service passage felt narrower than usual. The air tasted like dust and electricity, and something else. Anticipation. The illegal cabinet hummed softly in the darkness. 2 more men waited near it, dressed as techs, cables coiled at their feet. One of them held a small case with foam cutouts. The maintenance worker recognized one of the devices inside, a signal splitter. "We'll intercept from here for 1 cycle," the man in the vest said. "Original box stays powered. We piggyback our traffic on their line. They hear us as if nothing changed." "And the people up there?" the worker asked, tilting his head toward the concrete ceiling. "The ones listening?" "With luck," the suit said, "they'll panic just the right amount." He did not ask what just the right amount meant. He had learned that in this line of talk, specifics were not his friend. He watched them work. Gentle hands on cables, careful clips attached to lines he'd spent his life being told never to touch. For a few minutes, the illegal box and the legal one next to it shared nerves. Then the man with the case nodded. "We're in," he said. Up on the surface, in neighborhoods he would never see from underground, someone's cheap radio would soon hiss to life at the familiar time, on the familiar frequency. They would hear the familiar female voice. They would write down the numbers. But this time, someone else had written them. He never learned exactly what message they sent. He only knew the outline. Enough truth to make it believable. Enough poison to make it dangerous. A hint that an internal source was leaking. A suggestion that one of the local contacts had flipped. "People at that level don't need much to start doubting each other," one of the suits had said. "Our job is to give them a nudge and see whose chair falls over." The fallout didn't look like a movie. No car chases, no gunfights in the tunnels. It looked like subtle changes in a city's rhythm. A car that used to park near one entrance at night stopped appearing. A man who always took the 6:20 train switched to the bus. An economic attaché at a certain embassy was suddenly recalled due to family matters. On the news, there was a small story, weeks later, about a foreign intelligence network disrupted through close cooperation between services. No mention of tunnels, no mention of a cabinet, no mention of a man in orange overalls who had simply refused to accept a box that wasn't on his map. He didn't get a medal, he got paperwork. One day, his supervisor called him into the office with a carefully neutral face. "Reorganization," he said. "Too many senior staff on this line. They're moving you to depot work, less night tunnel duty." It sounded like a punishment and a favor at the same time. His back thanked him. His pride did not. Still, he read between the lines. Getting moved sideways was better than being noticed from above. He signed the transfer. He cleaned out his locker. He folded his orange overalls and put them in a different cupboard, in a different building. On his last night in his old section, he took one final walk between Central and Riverside. He had no work order. He did it on an excuse, checking for loose fixtures before handing over the route. The tunnels felt the same. The illegal cabinet was gone. In its place was blank concrete, with 4 bolt holes filled in and painted over. The old official cabinet hummed along, as if nothing interesting had ever happened beside it. He stood there for a minute, hand on the wall where the secret box had been. His palm felt only cold paint. No vibration. No secret heartbeat. The numbers station had gone silent on his line. Somewhere else, far away, someone was probably still reading digits into the void. The game never really stopped. It just moved. But at least it wasn't hitching a ride on his cables anymore. Years later, the story leaked. Not all of it, just enough to make a headline. Cold War spy transmissions hidden in city infrastructure, one foreign magazine wrote. They mentioned a European capital, covert use of transport networks, numbers broadcasts for deep cover agents. They quoted an anonymous security official saying, "The breakthrough came when a maintenance worker noticed a cabinet that wasn't on any official diagram." They did not name him. They did not need to. He read it on a break, in a depot break room that smelled like oil and cheap coffee. One of his younger colleagues laughed. "Like a thriller," the kid said. "As if some guy in overalls could outsmart half the world's spies." He shrugged. "Sometimes the guy in overalls is the only one who actually looks at the wall," he said. The kid rolled his eyes, the same way his daughter used to. He didn't argue. He just finished his coffee and went back to checking brakes. He didn't miss the night tunnels. Not really. But sometimes, when the train he was testing ran empty through the old section, he would look out into the darkness where that cabinet had once stood. He would think about numbers whispered into the concrete, about keys changing hands for money, about men in suits feeding lies back up the same wire, and about the simple, stupid, stubborn decision that had started it all. A man who knew his map refusing to pretend that a stranger's box belonged there. In the end, that was the part no service report ever captured. Not the acronyms, not the successful disruption of hostile activities. Just one tired worker, a flashlight, and a cabinet that didn't exist until he decided it did.